Episode 347, The Underground Palace. Jessup stopped walking in a quiet courtyard far away from the banquet hall. Jessup stopped walking and repeated, "Alex, there's something I need to show you." Then he slowly twisted a hidden mechanism on a huge rock, causing the rockery to divide into two pieces and an entrance to appear suddenly. Jessup entered the gap, and Alex followed him. There was a long row of steps under the entrance of the cave. As they made their way down the steps, the hole closed behind them, and the lights went on. It was a very secret place for the Clifton family. It was like an underground palace, and very few people had been allowed to go there. The fact that Jessup took Alex there showed how much he trusted him. Jessup pushed open a jeweled door and said, "Alex, my family has accumulated wealth for so many years that it would be impossible for one generation to spend it all. People from outside the family have underestimated the Clifton family's financial resources. Even if we were to lose all our properties, that would only be a tiny proportion lost from our actual wealth. Please, take any item that you would like." Alex was a little surprised, but he wasn't very interested in money or valuables. He said, "Mr. Clifton, you've planned well for the future. I admire you greatly. But I won't take anything. Thank you for your trust." Jessup was surprised. He said, "These jewels are indescribably beautiful and valuable, and yet you're barely looking at them. When you and Debbie are married, I'll bring her to choose many items for herself. Now come with me." Jessup took a long breath as he said this. He had a low opinion of his children and grandchildren, and he had already regarded Alex as his closest relative. Alex was the only person apart from him who knew about the underground palace. After walking for several minutes, they arrived in a tiny room. Compared with the other rooms, it was very plainly decorated, and even smelled a little damp. Once he had entered the room, Jessup reached up into a small niche on the wall and carefully took out a piece of white jade. Alex's eyes were immediately drawn to the object, which was around a white phoenix that glowed gently in the light. It was flawless. The most eye-catching part of the phoenix was its head, with prominent eyes and fierce features. Alex knew that the phoenix was fabled to be a ferocious creature. He sensed that the object was both ancient and mysterious. Jessup stroked the jade and said, "Alex, have you ever heard of the Black Orchid cult?" "No? Who are they?" Alex remained motionless, although he felt a deep sense of foreboding from the object. He listened intently as Jessup carefully explained the relationship between the Black Orchid cult and the Clifton family. He continued to feel a strong sense of uneasiness in the presence of the phoenix. "Alex, the Clifton family and the Black Orchid cult have now been separated, but we still obey their orders. However, I have never given them this jade phoenix. Some of the rules of the cult are outdated and cruel, and I'm afraid of what might happen if this falls into their hands. The cult is also the reason that Debbie and I can't be together, despite the fact that we're so close." Jessup was deep in thought. He was calm, but he also seemed to be anxious. At that moment, a ringing bell disturbed him from his contemplation, and he looked shocked. He was carrying a high-tech alarm on his body, which wouldn't ring unless there was an emergency. "We must go," he told Alex as he quickly turned and walked out carrying the phoenix. Alex followed him. 10 minutes earlier in the banquet hall, the tables had been overflowing with food and wine, and there was a lot of joyful chatter and laughter. Debbie was eating, but also occasionally glancing at the door, wondering why her grandfather and Alex hadn't returned. Suddenly, she heard the thundering of a drum coming from outside the hall. The sound seemed to be getting closer and closer. 4 men in lion costumes followed a smaller man, who was beating a drum slowly into the hall. Rufus stood up and asked, "Who let you in? We didn't order any performers." In Jessup's absence, Rufus took charge. The drummer took a step closer and said, "We heard that the Cliftons were holding a family banquet. We hope that you would hire us to entertain you." When Rufus looked closely, he realized that it was Noel Jacobs, a local performer who regularly came to Clifton's mansion to perform for money. He often played, sang and danced for them, and was paid fairly for his efforts by the family. "You're smart to try your luck. Here's $1,000 for you to share between you, but we don't need you to perform for us today." However, the men in the lion costumes had already started to dance. Everyone cheered as they moved gracefully through the crowd. The dancers were elegant and skillful, and everyone applauded. When several people took out their cell phones to record the performance, the lion suddenly stopped dancing. Noel was still beating his drum, but he turned to the dancers and yelled angrily, "Hey, what are you doing? Why have you stopped dancing?" He stared at the dancers. They suddenly removed their costumes to reveal themselves. They were 4 big men with cruel expressions. "What are you doing?" Noel screamed in horror as the 4 men slowly walked toward him. They no longer looked meek and humble as they had when he hired them, but suddenly seemed strong and aggressive. One of them knocked him to the ground, rendering him unconscious before he could say any more. The whole audience was in uproar as the Clifton family security guards rushed toward the men. Rufus also rushed forward. "Who are you and what do you want? Guards, seize these men." Rufus's eyes were fierce as he stared at the 4 mysterious attackers. They needed to be captured to preserve the reputation of the Clifton family. "Are you challenging me?" asked one of the men with a Canadian accent. Although his voice was very quiet, it penetrated the atmosphere and reverberated throughout the hall. "Noel insulted us, so he had to die. In a moment, you will all die too." The men were surrounded by Clifton family members and security guards, but they looked relaxed and in control.